shooting on film. What a beautiful thing to do. What a beautiful thing to want to do. It's such a pure expression of the photography experience. It's got such a rich and amazing history, and despite its resurgence in current years and alternatives available, it's not a fad and it's not going away. It's oil paints versus painting on your iPad. It's appreciating classic cars and antiques. But what it is doing is getting very, very expensive. Virtually out of my price range, which sucks because I love it so much. But are there things that you can do to bring costs down? Yeah, there definitely are. Step one would be don't shoot medium format like I was just doing. Stick with 35mm. And the best deals on cameras are going to be the ones without retro, vintage, antique appeal. Something from the late 80s to mid 90s that may in fact work with lenses you already own. Then you're going to breeze on over to Walmart where you're going to find this deal, $22.98 for 108 exposures. This is the best deal going and has been for years, although this price has crept up over time, but at a slower rate than all other films you're going to find. Nice. Better still, this was my mom's camera. Maybe you have a family member with an old camera packed away in a box, willing to donate to the cause of you shooting film for as little money as possible. This camera actually has a focusing issue, but I find that it's a charming focusing issue. If it were my one and only film camera, I would probably get it fixed, but I actually don't want to get it fixed because it's imperfect in a way that I can't predict and wouldn't be able to replicate intentionally. It just does something that's always a little different than what I expect, focusing-wise, and yes, it can occasionally just completely fuck up the shot, but more often I'm just pleasantly surprised by what it does on its own, by its mere existence. So I let it be. I have fun with it. And I'm not ashamed to say that the imperfections are exactly what I seek out in film photography in the first place. It's not that I think, oh, old technology is better than new technology. I don't think that for a second. I think old technology is charming and fun and has a lot of character. And this just is another example of that. Which is not to say that I don't appreciate high megapixel digital images with technically perfect lenses. I do. I appreciate both. Somehow we're not allowed to appreciate the spectrum of things. Generally speaking, we have to pick a side. Fuck picking sides. Fuck you and your fucking side, you fuck. So cheap film, it's that Fujifilm 400 from Walmart. That's just as good as the good stuff, right? The expensive film stocks, it's all the same, right? No. But it's surprisingly all right. If you do a side-by-side comparison, you're going to be very unhappy. So maybe just don't. Of course, at some point you're going to want to try other film stocks, and of course you're going to want to try other formats, other cameras, which is fine, and you don't need me to tell you it's fine. I'm singularly focused here on telling you how to do it as cheaply as possible, because I've managed to continue shooting film the last 3 years or so, despite some pretty rough financial times. And this is how. And this building used to be my studio 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Seeing it mid-destruction was frankly heartbreaking. I loved this place. Made me very sad. I'm out here shooting film only because that's the camera I had with me. I just needed to document, I don't know, the violence, the destruction, the symbolism for what my wife and I are going through in our actual life. Seems very appropriate. We're about to lose our house. That is, we can no longer afford to pay for it because of rising healthcare costs for parents. This year has just been shit for us. It's been one insane shit year. And so this just sums it up perfectly. The destruction of something I love. It's time to move on. And this is as good a way of visualizing that as I could possibly imagine. But I'm starting a fresh roll of cheap film here from Walmart, and why does it look like that? Well, it looks like that because when my chemicals, my development chemicals, are reaching the end of their life, I fuck around with the film. And I'll get into that a little bit when we get to the development part of this process. First, I have to move the fuck out of my house. We have a 2-day window to get out before I have surgery. So, fairly full schedule here. Here's my cat taking a last look at her backyard. It's a very sad moment, actually. But poignant. I don't know, we're all in this together. The cat, the wife, and I. We have 2 days to get the fuck out, move all our stuff, 40% of our stuff actually, because most of it's not going to fit in the new apartment. The apartment is just the cheapest, shittiest apartment we could find. I mean, shitty wasn't the goal, cheap was, but those two things often go together. And we have to get out. We have 2 days, 2 nights to move everything we can into the apartment, and then the rest we're just donating / letting, or not letting, but paying for someone to haul away the rest and deposit at the city dump. And we return the truck, and I immediately go off to do my surgery at the hospital. So here we go. Surgery, you may be surprised to learn, is not my favorite activity in the world, but here, now it's done. They chopped open my guts, and now I get to go home and recover. That is, stare at the ceiling for weeks. But I don't stare at the ceiling for weeks. After about 3 days, I'm bored out of my mind, and I get up, wounds a leaking, and I just start taking some more film photos around my apartment complex. My new apartment complex. My totally unfamiliar apartment complex. Here's my chance to get to know it a little bit, while blatantly disregarding my surgery restrictions. Surely no harm will come of that. That sounds like a fantastic idea. So I recommend photographing your negatives rather than scanning them by traditional means. Any affordable scanner you're going to find will do a terrible job. And in order to get a scanner that does a very good job, you're going to end up spending as much as you would on a professional camera. So even though you're leaving some resolution on the table, you are getting a raw file out of it that you can tweak as you would normally tweak a digital raw file, and you're going to get the best results this way. Of course, just obviously fill the frame with your frame of film, unlike what I did. I was just trying to demonstrate, which may require that you have to purchase a macro lens. I certainly did, but I spent $400 on a used one, and it works fantastic. Trust me, that $400 is better spent on a macro lens than it is on a scanner. So why do these film photos look so degraded with color splotches and more than your usual standard amount of degradation? Well, because I took the film canisters, the cartridges, and I threw them into nearly boiling water and added dish soap and hot sauce into the water. Let it soak for a few hours. Took them out and then developed as normal. The results of doing something like that are, as you might imagine, unpredictable. Some images are very degraded, while others you can't even tell. But overall, I think I regret my decision to do this to the film. It added something cool to maybe one or two. Yikes, let's you and me just agree not to talk about what that looked like. But last time I did this, I got some of my favorite film shots ever, so you just never know. Sorry, my tongue is frozen. I'm eating a popsicle. It's funny, not that I thought I invented this, but recently I discovered that this is a thing people do. Evidently, it's called film soup. I got the idea from an article I read in the 90s. I mean, I wasn't even a photographer yet, but it just stuck with me. And I photographed my film on top of a light table, which basically looks like an iPad or an Android tablet, only its singular purpose is to produce light. Could you just use an iPad or something like that? Yes and no. See, here I am using that macro lens that I bought for scanning. Actually, I find I'm using it more and more and more. I was never into macro photography, and that's changing. I'm not into photographing bugs and whatnot, but finding textures out in the wild is a cool thing to do with it, I've found. And it's a decent portrait lens also. So if you place your film on top of your tablet, Android tablet, iPad sort of thing, and photograph it in the way I was showing previously, the pixels will be discernible. It will not look great. Is there a way around that? Yeah, kinda. And I am going to get into that because it's also a solution to other problems that might come up. But this is not one area I would take the cheapest route possible. I actually find that the light table, it's better quality out of the gate, but it's also ridiculously more convenient and not a super expensive piece of equipment. I really should not be walking this far after surgery. Something that will be confirmed to me after I have a checkup and find out that I'm not healing properly. Guess that's when you know you really love photography. When you're like willing to sacrifice your health to take some silly photos of shadows on a sidewalk. But that's just how fun shooting film is. Film is fun. Film is also curly. And one of the great challenges of scanning, quote, scanning with a DSLR or mirrorless camera is getting it uncurly without covering the frame. I demonstrated how I like to do it, which is just to weigh it down. I use a piece of paper or an envelope with a battery on top to weigh it down, and I go frame by frame that way. But what if your light table is giving you inconsistent color, or it's blotchy brightness, or you're using an iPad and the pixels are discernible? We'll just elevate the film, throw the light source out of focus, and those problems go away. But of course, it's not that simple, because dealing with the curliness of film becomes more difficult when it's no longer sitting flat on the light table. Well, fortunately, this problem has been pretty much solved. There are various contraptions that will clamp down on your film and hold it in place without covering too much of it. I don't want to recommend one over the others because I actually own several and all of them have their flaws. I think there's a lot of personal preference involved as far as how much of the edge of the frame do you want to show versus eliminating all curl, because that is the compromise. And I think it's also highly situational. So similar to me, especially if you're shooting different formats as I do, you're going to end up starting a collection of film holders. So yeah, there's a little bit of a cost involved, of course, but it's still going to be a way better deal over time than having your film professionally scanned. You might be thinking that a piece of glass would solve this problem, or two pieces of glass to flatten your film, but you would be wrong. Because, well, just look up a concept called Newton rings, and you will understand why. Because you will get them, and they will be the bane of your existence. Also, while I'm spending your money, get a level for consistent focus across the frame. So, we've got our raw file. We come on over to the tone curve section of our editing software, and we just reverse it. We turn it upside down or sideways or whatever the fuck. Tweak until we get something we like. And that's pretty much all you gotta do. I have a lot of photos of my cat, not only because I love my cat and I like photographing my cat, but because when you're shooting film and you need to develop the film, you end up kind of hurrying through the last couple frames on the roll. Well, you may not, but I certainly do. So for scanning, here's the main stuff you need. A camera body, a macro lens, a tripod, a light box or light table, a level that fits in your hot shoe, and something to hold the film. For developing, you need C41 chemicals. some kind of measuring container to mix the chemicals. Then you need 3 bottles in which to store the chemicals, a waterproof thermometer, a funnel, a few clamps to hold your film after it comes out of the tank. You will of course need a tank, which comes with reels. Generally you will need the reels, and although I sometimes skip it, for clean, perfect film you'll want a film squeegee. These first couple of steps here you can do in the light, and what I'm showing you will make your life so much easier. Load the film onto the reel as it's just poking out of the cartridge, okay? You don't need to pop open the cartridge. This part you'll be doing in the dark. They do make a light tight bag that a lot of people like for doing this stuff I'm showing you here, but I just do it in a dark room. I can always get a bathroom dark enough to do this. So this is really loading the film on the reel is the only thing you need to do in the dark, and it is difficult, but I'm demonstrating the easiest way I've found, because you can go horribly wrong, and in the dark it's surprisingly difficult to correct. Now that the film is on the reel and the reel is in the tank, you can leave the lights on for the remainder. So your chemicals are going to come with instructions, and those instructions will be different than my instructions, presumably. So I'm going to deal in broad strokes here. So get a plastic bin, fill it with hot water. I usually do this before I load the film on the reel. And thus by the time I check the temperature the first time, it's usually too hot. So I just run cold water over the bottle for a couple of minutes. I'm shooting for 102 degrees Fahrenheit with my chemistry. Sometimes I go a little too far the other way with the cold water, so I just throw it back in the hot water, pull it out after a minute, check the temperature again. Repeat until I land on 102. So again, just follow your instructions, not necessarily what I'm doing. But this is essentially what the process is like. You're pouring chemicals into your tank, and then you're doing inversions with the tank every 30 seconds. So you'll do this first with the developer, which is what I'm doing here, inversions every 30 seconds for however many minutes the instructions indicate. After you pour that back in the container, you will then repeat with Blix, rinse with water, and then there will be a final step, which is a stabilizer. And that's basically it. It is not difficult. It can be time consuming if you have a lot of rolls to develop, but it is not difficult. Hey, what's up, Miyako? And here's a final list of things that you may want to have on hand. A plastic bin to heat the chemicals, gloves, goggles, a timer, paper for weighing down or protecting the film as you weigh it down during scanning, and then something to weigh it down with. Or, as an alternative, something to elevate it with above the light box. And then a blower, a squeezy blower thing to get the dust off the negatives. And that's essentially all I have. So I'm gonna slink away and, I don't know, go overeat or something.